Hi again, it's Gunnar Wettergren, and today we're going to talk about the first chapter in the book by Pinto, which is a part of the course material for business the business course or the product management course in business strategies and IT projects. And this first part is going to be very much a review of what's been talked about in previous courses and in some extent in this course as well. But it's good to set the stage, I think, and make sure that we remember some of the things that we previously talked about. Um, so why product management? I guess that's a good question, and some examples of products that the author brings out that has been big and has been a part of our history, I guess, is the Tunnel on the English Channel, uh, Windows 7, Windows 8, Mac OS X, Olympic Games, and so on. There's no shortage of products. There's no shortage of examples, good and bad, of course. Not all products are successful, as you will notice when we move on through this presentation, right? But the first thing I think that we should talk about is the difference between projects and process, and also define a little bit what a product is. So if we take a look at the process that every organization has, one could say their daily job, the day-to-day activities. A process is ongoing, it never stops. It has a goal, but the goal changes over time, but the process is continuous. In a product, on the other hand, we see that it's unique in some form, it's separated from the routine part of work, and it's continually evolving, and it has a set goal or a set idea of what we're trying to do. And I think the key thing here is probably the temporary aspect of a project, and that it wants to create something that's unique that we haven't done before. Whatever that is. It could be very small or it could be very big, right? So there is a distinct difference between a process and a project. I think that's worth remembering and taking with you when you study this. Some additional definitions. If you pick up any product management book, you'll find a definition, and they're all correct in one sense or another. So just pick one and or develop your own that you feel is relevant. But if you look at the common denominator of all these definitions, you usually find that it has specific objectives. It has a start and an end date. It's temporary in nature. It doesn't have an infinite amount of resources, right? The money is limited. So taking all the definitions together and kind of extracting what they have in common, this is somewhere almost where you would end up, I think. All right. Another way to view product is, it is a complex process. It is a one-time process. One could say not all products are the same, or one could say very few are the same, but they do share some criteria. They do share some traits. So normally we can kind of learn what we've done and reuse parts of what we've done. It has an inherent limitation in budget, schedule, and resources that kind of makes our job hard, one could say, right? But it also has a customer focus, which we talked about. And this is something that comes up depending on how you approach it, depending on which the models you use, depending on what your philosophy around product management is, the customer focus is different. For example, if you compare the waterfall model, which this book stems from, compared to, for example, an agile view of the world, right? So, generalizing even more, we see products as something that's ad hoc. It has building blocks in design, execution, organizational strategies. It has a process, one could say, but it's a time-limited process with kind of distinct steps. And if you look at an agile approach, you'll have distinct steps, but they're different. They're done in a different way. So it's the general approach or the general discussion around products is still the same. It's just different ways of doing different things, I guess. Okay. Another thing is products tend to be crossing functional organizational boundaries, and this is normally where most of the problems occur, when you need to have people from different parts of the organization that do not have the same manager, they do not have the same maybe culture or the same ways of doing things. So that's interesting to remember, I think, that it spans over the whole organization. But it also is very traditional in a sense. I mean, it has all the elements of a traditional management function. Planning, organization, motivation, directing, controlling, and so on and so forth. But you are working in a different environment. You don't have a work process per se like the day-to-day business where we have a set way of doing it. A project can change, and it should change quite often. During the project, we have to select how we approach the problem, how we choose to do the work, and so on. Right? And a product is terminated. A traditional process is not. Unless the company goes bankrupt or reorganizes, then the process could change. All right? So the process versus project discussion is something that is ongoing and something that pops up quite often in talking about how products fit into an organization, because it's quite an easy way to give you a sense of what the role of products are. So this is kind of a summary of the process aspect of day-to-day business and the project aspects of developing new products and services and what the difference is. So I would look through this and to get a feeling for what products are compared to the general process of running a company. All right, products is hard. We've said that previously, and we're not doing really well, unfortunately. There are numerous statistics. I think this one is quite accurate, that we have roughly around a 65% fail rate when it comes to projects. About half our IT projects go over budget, or what's called runaways. And so on. You can read through the statistics on your own, I think, and look online as well. There's a report called the Standish Group releases a report, if it's annually or biannually, I can't remember, but it's called the Chaos Report, which they talk about how we are doing when it comes to projects, and that's quite an interesting reading, actually, because they do quite a hefty analysis and statistical analysis on how well we're doing, I guess, right? Because there's a lot of money in this. Imagine that 65% of the projects fail, maybe not completely fail, but go over budget, or, for example, here, the Iraqi example, that 42% of the projects were actually terminated. That's 42% of the money down the drain, I guess, one could say. So there's a lot of money being spent on products that do not deliver. So the question then is, and we've talked about this previously as well, the importance of products and why that is. I mean, the time to market is increasingly important, which basically is the time from an idea until it hits the shelf and can be sold. We see that the product life cycle is shorter, so the time to market becomes more important. The time we have to make money on our product is getting shorter, so we need to get the product out as quickly as possible, right? I mean, products are increasingly complex and technical. We're moving into the even bigger global market, right? So products have an important role to play in taking ideas and turning them into products. It's not perfect. We saw that on the previous slide, that there's a lot of problems with products. But so far one could say that the positive aspects of this far overshadow the negative ones. Okay. The product life cycle. We talked about this previously as well, that each product has a wanted life cycle and probably a realistic life cycle. This is very much a wanted life cycle, where we have the phases, we conceptualize, we plan, we execute, and we terminate. And obviously this is from a very traditional product management viewpoint. An agile product will not look like this, for example. It would have a different type of life cycle. Okay. So when we move into the conceptualization, it's setting the goals, looking at technical specifications, starting the project. Planning is, of course, all the planning that we need to be able to execute. It can be plans, schedules, schematics, how we're going to do things, all the nitty-gritty detail needed. Execution, the actual work, implementing whatever we're doing, and termination, which is transferring the product or service to the customer and saying, okay, we're done, let's close down the project. So that's a very, very quick view of what a product life cycle or the generic life cycle of a project from a waterfall-ish point of view, at least. All right? But if you look at the life cycle and the various aspects of a life cycle, this is a pretty interesting graph. Down here you can see conceptual, planning, execution, termination, right? But on this side, on the y-axis, you see the client interest, product stake, resources, creativity, uncertainty, and these fluctuate over time. Let's start by the client interest. We see that it starts quite high, and as the product executes, it goes down, and as the product closes in on finishing and being terminated, it increases again. Very much like a sinus curve, and this makes sense, right? Everybody's very excited in the beginning. The nitty-gritty day-to-day work comes, and then the interest goes down, and then as the product is about to be finished, it goes up again. That makes sense. If we then take a look at the product stake, we see that in the beginning of the product, our stake in the product is not so high. We haven't really invested that much into the project. We're still in a conceptual or planning phase. Nothing has really started to get done. But as we move through these phases into the execution and then into the termination phase, we see that the product stake goes up. I mean, we invest more into a product, hence our stake increases, right? If you look at resources, it starts quite low, peaks during the execution phase, which makes sense, and then tampers off into the termination phase. So that also makes sense, right? We need the most bulk of our employees and the bulk of the hours inside the execution phase. And then the creativity is normally in the conceptual phase and into the planning phase. We are very creative because that's where we set the stage, that's where we do all the design, that's where we do all the thinking. And it peaks during the execution and tampers off when we move into the termination phase. Of course, that makes sense as well. And uncertainty is also deals with the fact, depending on the horizon, right? If we are looking into the future quite a bit, our uncertainty is high. But as we move through and get closer to the termination of the project, the uncertainty goes down. Because A, we learn from what we do, and B, the time frame of how far ahead we need to plan or to make decisions about is getting closer. So it's easier for us. So it's a pretty interesting graph, I think, that you should take some time to think about. Looking at normally you would look at a triangle or 3 dimensions here, the budget, the schedule, and the performance. But this book, or this author, added a 4th one, client acceptance, which is quite interesting. But it makes the actual part of the project, or the actual complexity of being a product manager even higher. But it does make sense to add them. We have the traditional ones, which is the budget, the schedule, and the performance. And we talked previously about we need to find a somewhat equilibrium between these three so that we reach all of them within the budget, within the schedule, within what we wanted to do. But there's also a level saying that, okay, we might have delivered what we set out to do, but we still didn't satisfy the customer, right? Because we misunderstood, or we didn't develop what the customer really wanted, or something like that. So adding the client acceptance is an interesting idea, and I think it makes total sense. But it does leave us with this little squarish kind of thing in the middle. That's our point of success. It makes it smaller, and it makes our job as a product manager harder. But it does give us a richer picture, and it does give us a more accurate view of being a product manager, of what our work is really about. So it makes sense to add it. Right? If we start looking at product success, we see that basically there are a lot of criteria, right? But according to this author at least, it comes down to 6 things. The quality of the system and information, how it's used, how the user satisfaction is done, individual impact, and organizational impact. And this is obviously interesting from many point of view. When we look at the quality aspect of things, of course we need to have information that we can rely on. The system needs to be of high quality. We need to be able to use it. But probably the more important aspects when it comes to acceptance is how good is it to use, how satisfied are the users, what kind of impact does it have on me as an individual employee. Does it make my life easier or harder? I guess that would be the bottom line. And organizational impact. What are the effects on the organization? Did we get the effects we wanted? I mean, that's probably one of the biggest success factors, that we actually reached the goals that we wanted to reach with this.